terms of her being a victim of sexual violence twice. It was the trigger that took her over the edge. My daughter took her life on June 29th, 2000. Her being a victim of sexual violence twice. Now, in 2021, it was the trigger that took her over the edge. 10 years later, she would have been 25. My daughter took her life on June 29th, 2000. Her being a victim of...
This is a ring the alarm moment that we have to understand what is happening in terms of these increasing trends.
Each succeeding generation of Blacks are becoming more susceptible to the forces that lead them to consider suicidal behavior.
What we know for sure is that there are huge gaps in both access to quality mental health and access to culturally responsive mental and behavioral health services.
This is a tough period. This is a period of immense, complicated grief.
The pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, I don't know a Black person, Black kid who does not look at George Floyd and see themselves.
How do you help those who are not in the behavioral health care system get comfortable? There are still barriers for those who can't afford it. There's still barriers for those who can't get to it. And then there's still barriers regarding, does it really work for us?
There are a number of very highly trained, very highly committed professionals here to help bridge those gaps. One kind and caring adult can make all the difference.
Just to provide a lifeline, a support, an idea that you will get stronger, this will end, and you will be in a better space of joy. That sort of hope, that sort of lifeline is natural in the Black experience. We just got to tie it in.
I remind myself regularly, I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. I know more now, but I didn't know it then, so I can't fault myself for what I didn't know. And acknowledging that I did know a lot. Instead of a gym rat, I became a yoga rat. Just to have a private space. Talk therapy was really crucial in the same time. So much of the stigma being, those aren't our problems. Mental health issues, that's a white person problem. It's like, no. Advocate for yourself and advocate for your child. So the Seaway Project is just for us to comfortably have the conversation with us and destigmatize it. To that mom, to that dad, to that parent, to that Black mom specifically, take care of yourself. Don't suffer in silence. You're going to suffer anyhow. Talk to somebody about it. Get some help to heal. My daughter
Good evening and welcome. I am Lee Whitaker, president of the Niagara Falls, New York chapter of the Links Incorporated. We're happy that you are able to join us for our very first public broadcast focusing on suicide and mental health. The Niagara Falls, New York chapter of the Links puts a very strong emphasis on health and human services to the Niagara County community. A bit of history for those of you who are not familiar with our organization. The Links Incorporated is an international not-for-profit corporation established November 9th, 1946. The membership consists of over 16,000 professional women of color in 296 chapters located in 42 states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and the United Kingdom. Our core values are friendship, integrity, honesty, service, commitment, family relationships, courage, respect for self and others, legacy, confidentiality, responsibility, and accountability. It is one of the nation's oldest and largest volunteer service organizations of extraordinary women who are committed to enriching, sustaining, and ensuring the culture and economic survival of African American and other persons of African ancestry. A strong focus is given to education, cultural enrichment, health, wellness, and civic involvement. The Links Incorporated is an entity which, through its chapters and the Links Foundation Incorporated, has granted millions of dollars to charitable organizations. The Niagara Falls, New York chapter of the Links Incorporated was chartered on May 24th, 1950, by the late Alice C. Hayes, whose husband, the late Charles B. Hayes, was one of the city's first Black physicians. The chapter is the 14th chapter in the Eastern area that was chartered and the 20th chartered nationwide. The Niagara Falls chapter is the parent to both the both the Buffalo and the Erie County chapters. A native of New York City and the graduate of Hunter College, Mrs. Hayes plunged into community leadership at a time when very few Black men and virtually no Black women were known outside of the Black community. She was interested in youth and established a scholarship fund for Black youth. She interviewed and encouraged countless Black city youth and minority adult leaders, not only in her expressions of thoughts, but financially and through contributions of her time. Locally, our chapter has reached out near and far to assist others. Annually, the chapter has made charitable contributions and given support to other organizations and numerous other charities and service organizations. Additionally, the chapter has sponsored or co-sponsored youth development programs and conferences, mentoring programs, cultural festivals, themed luncheons, and walkathons for health and work on combating hunger drives. We administered the Dr. and Mrs. Charles B. Hayes Memorial Medical Scholarship, the Mariella Gentry Scholarship Fund, the Elizabeth Fields Bradley Memorial Scholarship Fund, and the General Scholarship Fund. The Niagara Falls, New York chapter of the Links Incorporated has partnered with Colgate Dental Band the spring of 2019, where we serviced more than 800 students in Niagara Falls, the town of Niagara, and the Lockport school system. We have annually sponsored the mammography ban, even during the pandemic, health and human workshops, the Kidney Foundation, among countless others. We have sponsored several field trips for our youth, including a tour of the GM corporate offices in Detroit, Michigan, local hospitals, the Yahoo Technical Facility, science museums, and a field trip to Attica Correctional Facility for a workshop on the end results of making wrong choices. We support participation in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and now arts. Our chapter members have to volunteer a minimum of 48 hours of service to the community and has amassed more than 500,000 hours of community service nationwide. We continue to encourage our youth to attend historically Black colleges, and we continue our work in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'd like to thank you for that introduction of our chapter. Right now, we'd like to share some slides with you, some statistical slides. So if you would take a look in regards to suicide. Timing of US suicides. There is one suicide every 11 minutes. 130 suicides every day. Estimates of attempted suicides, 25 attempts for each documented death. Number of those impacted, roughly 48,000 plus. Americans die each year. Impact of suicide, 135 are exposed, 53 have short-term disruption in life, 25 have a major life disruption, 11 have devastating effects on our life. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our suicide prevention workshop, sponsored by the Niagara Falls chapter of the Links Incorporated. My name is Stephanie Dudley Tillman. I am the chair of our Health and Human Services facet. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, we hope to enlighten, educate, remind, and bring awareness to suicide prevention. We are pleased to present a wonderful panel of speakers who will share some details regarding our topic. September is Suicide Prevention Month. Know that you are never alone. Suicide is a tragic end to something that is a solvable problem. As we welcome our panelists, we ask that you type in your comments in our chat and comment boxes, and we'll address them as we proceed on with the night. I'd like to introduce our first speaker this evening, Dr. Charlize Perry. She is a doctorate-prepared psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, graduating from SUNY Buffalo in 2015. She is currently working as a provider on a local adult inpatient psychiatric unit. In addition, she services clients through an assertive community treatment, ACT team. Dr. Perry received her Bachelor of Nursing Science in 2009 from SUNY Buffalo and has a Bachelor in Psychology from Canisius College. She is also involved in several organizations such as Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and serves as a board secretary of Buffalo Black Nurses. Most recently, she became a charter member of a nursing sorority, Chi Eta Phi Sorority Incorporated. Dr. Charlize Perry continues to be an active member in her community by helping to uplift the community she loves, helping to close health disparities, increase mental health awareness, and decrease mental health stigmas. Please welcome Dr. Charlize Perry.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm almost embarrassed. That was like so much. Well, thank you for having me. I won't take a lot of time. You told enough, but I want to talk more about barriers and kind of just getting real with everything. In the space of your own home, I want you to answer some questions. I'll go through them really quickly. Raise your hand. I'm not really looking, but it's really for you. Okay. How many people know someone who's been impacted by depression or anxiety? Right. How many people know someone who's been impacted by what they consider a more serious mental health diagnosis, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder? How many people have been impacted by someone who has committed suicide? How many people have contemplated suicide themselves? Sometimes these questions are getting a little bit harder, and for good reason. How many people are willing to admit that they too suffer from a mental health diagnosis? My name is Charlize Perry, and I suffer from anxiety and depression. And that was one thing I would never have said to someone about once upon a time. How can I, as a mental health provider, be someone who is so lost in a moment, having so much anxiety, so much depression? It was to a point where I was afraid to talk to someone. And when I think about it that way, I was part of the problem. I was part of that stigma, that reason why we don't get the help that we need, why people are afraid to get help. And how do we change that? I work in an inpatient psychiatric unit. And as you can imagine, I run into many people who have attempted suicide. But I will tell you one thing, by the time they leave, 100% of those people regret their decision. Kind of just let that sink in. If 100% of people who survived a suicide attempt regret it. Imagine how many people we could have actually helped, how many people we could have stopped if they just opened up, if they just said something, if they got the help that they needed. So we have to focus on the barriers that's out there. And the way that we reduce barriers, the way that we increase access is education, education, education. And that's why we're here today, is to kind of just talk about some real things that's impacting our community. Once upon a time, and I know I heard it, especially as a young child, that we weren't allowed to have depression. We wasn't allowed to be worried or have certain mental illness. And like the video said, it was culturally not a Black problem. And that's why we have suffered for so long. Mental illness impacts us all the same. The problem is that because of our barriers, because of our inability to get help, the inability, even perceived, even the barriers placed on by society, those make our mental health worse because we take so long to get help. How can we reduce those barriers? That is like the biggest concern that I have. When we talk about things in inpatient, I have people who are at their lowest point. They have hit the end. The treatment that I do there is mostly stabilization. We do medication management. I'm a prescriber. I do prescribe medication. We do basic counseling, but honestly, it's just getting them back on track and getting them linked to community services. I'm getting them linked to outpatient counseling. A lot of times there's other things that's going on that we have to address as well. It's not a linear problem. It's homelessness. It is financial issues. It is physical health. There's so many things that go into somebody's psyche and their own mental well-being. And it's very hard to say that it's just one thing or the another. The biggest thing is going to get the help that you need. One of the things that I do want to point out, because I also do ministry in church, mental health ministry, we know that the church sometimes is not very kind to mental illness. And sometimes I get a little, little slack or, for saying that, but it's true. We go to our church, we go to our preachers, we go to the people that we trust, and they say, pray about it. How hurtful could that be? Don't you think at that time when a person's at the end of their rope, they have prayed? Of course they prayed, right? So for a person to be given that type of information in a period of time where they need something more, that kind of just pushes them away. Okay, we need to be more open. We need to be more accepting and bringing people in and being comfortable having these difficult conversations. So I'm hoping that would be a beginning. I'm sure that my colleagues will talk about different barriers in their field as well. But the biggest barrier is really not knowing what resources, not having them, and not being able to talk to someone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Charlize Perry. That was valuable information that you have given us. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and that would be Dr. Thomasina L. Cook. Dr. Thomasina L. Cook is a professor of criminal justice at Erie Community College. She has completed her doctoral work in counselor education and supervision and holds master's degrees in criminal justice administration and mental health counseling. She's a licensed mental health counselor and life coach and has a private counseling practice where she specializes in counseling offenders and victims in criminal justice system. Additionally, she is an adjunct counselor educator at Empire State College, Medaille College, and Niagara University. Her research areas include domestic violence, violence against women, victimology, juvenile delinquency, forensic counseling, homicide survivors, and women in the criminal justice system. She has written articles and presented on several topics related to victims of crime and mental health issues. In addition, she has provided mental health and criminal justice consultation to Niagara Falls City School District, Community Missions of Niagara Frontier Incorporated, Peace Incorporated, No Wounds Untreated Incorporated, and has received numerous awards in the fields of criminal justice and counseling. Outside of her academia, she has worked in Niagara County Sheriff's Department, the Niagara Falls Police Department. She is an active member of Frontier Chapter number 21, Order of Eastern Star, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Jack and Jill of America, National Association of Parliamentarians, and the Links Incorporated. She has served in leadership roles in all the above organizations. Other professional affiliations include board member of Friends of the Niagara Falls Public Library, member of the Task Force on the Women of Color to End Domestic Violence, Niagara University College of Education Advisory Committee, New York State Mental Health Counselor Association, and the New York State Criminal Justice Educators. She is the proud mother of 2 sons, Tahir Zion and Tristan Zamir. Please welcome Dr. Thomasina L. Cook.
Thank you, Stephanie. I want to talk about 3 things tonight. Like Dr. Charlize just said, I will be quick as well. I want to talk about the risk factors, how can we prevent suicide, and how we can encourage help. So I know we have this check box, and I would like for everyone to take a moment and answer this question: why people might consider suicide? Okay. Wow, thank you. So I want to kind of like cover, because what everyone typed in the chat is accurate. There's various reasons, and there may be complex reasons why a person might commit suicide. It could be due to difficult life events, such as traumatic childhood experiences. It could be as a result of someone dying in your family. It can be because of divorce. It can be because of misuse of drugs and alcohol. It could be from social isolation. We have been seeing an increase of that more since COVID. It can be because suffering from other mental health disorders. It can be from ongoing problems with work or even with financial issues. It can be because of a sense of feeling hopelessness. So one of the things I want to highlight is not just one thing that a person might consider committing suicide. It could be various different things. So the second thing I want to talk about is how we can prevent suicide. Keep in mind, like the video highlighted, suicide does not discriminate against no one based on their race, gender, age, and social economic status. However, suicide can be prevented. That's one thing I want to highlight tonight. Suicide can be prevented. The one key thing I want to also highlight is what you can do is by preventing suicide is to talk to the loved one or friend and to active listen. It's very essential for everyone to understand that talking and listening is an essential component in saving lives in the long term. Many people are afraid to talk about suicide. Like it highlighted in the video, and also how Dr. Perry mentioned, is in our culture, especially in African American culture, it's a taboo. And by talking about it, it can be deemed as dangerous. So the key thing, again, in order to save lives, is to actually talk about it. So in order to help prepare yourself to talk about it, there is some things that I recommend that you do not say to someone when they're feeling suicidal, such as cheer up, life is not too bad, just pray on it. Please get yourself together. What you got to complain about. And then also, you're just looking for attention. Because when you say things like that, it will make a person want to shut down. The key thing is a person who is having suicidal ideations would like to feel supported and encouraged. And how you can do that, again, is by having a conversation with them. And then also encourage him to receive help. One of the things that was highlighted also earlier is about depression. Keep in mind, depression is a slippery slope. And once you get on that slope, sometimes it may be difficult to get off. But you, as a family member, as a friend, you can assist them by encouraging them to get help, by reaching out to counseling or counselor, even if you're at your local school or even if you're at your place of employment. Most place of employment has EAP. You can also encourage them to speak to, their physician and maybe even speak to their clergy. But also you, if you have a loved one who may have suicide thoughts, you can encourage them to actually seek professional help immediately. Everyone on this call should know their local crisis hotline. It's very important. So for example, if you are living in Niagara County, our crisis hotline number is area code 716-285-3515. And if you are living in Erie County, the crisis hotline number is area code 716-834-3131. Those are essential numbers that I encourage that everybody on this call should have in their actual cell phones, because you may not know when a family member may need actual help. So again, encourage them to seek professional help. Encourage them that you are there to support them. Give them an opportunity to be able to express themselves in order for you to help them by monitoring them to see if you may need some additional support by calling crisis hotline or contacting another healthcare professional. So those are some key things to remember is one, know some of the risk factors, which everyone on this call pretty much highlighted. Also, know that suicide can be prevented. Remember to active listen and talk to your family member or a loved one or a friend who may be having suicide thoughts, and then encourage them to seek help. Help is available. One of the things is that there are various different types of forms of help. But if they need help, please encourage them to seek out help. Also, as I wrap up, I would like to say for anyone is that take some information down that we're going to be providing by the end of this this call, and to make sure that you have those numbers and those services accessible just in case. It's always good to have a safety plan just in case you are in need or you find someone in need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomasina. That was some valuable information, especially with the phone numbers. I know myself, I have in my phone program emergency numbers. Those would be considered emergency numbers. And you all might want to give thought to placing those numbers into your phone. So thank you so much for that information. I'd like to introduce our next panelist to you, Mrs. Ebony Rose. Ebony Rose has been employed as a school counselor with the Niagara Falls City School District since 2008. She is currently working at Niagara Falls High School, servicing students grades 9 through 12. She is a program liaison for the Early College Smart Scholars and Reach Scholar College Prep programs through Niagara University. She has a Master of Education degree in school counseling from Niagara University and is currently working on a Master of Education in school building and district leadership. Mrs. Rose holds membership with the American School Counselor Association, the Niagara Orleans Counselors Association, and during the 2020 school year, she became a member of the School Counseling Advisory Council at Niagara University. Mrs. Rose is the wife of Ramon Rose and the mother of twins, Journey Ali and Cairo Antoine. She is a faithful member and trustee at Christ Redemption Tabernacle Church in Niagara Falls, where she has devoted most of her time to ministry and community outreach activities. Please welcome Ebony Rose.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the women of the Links Incorporated for putting on this program. It is a worthy cause, a worthy topic, a worthy program. Also thank you to all of the other panelists for sharing their time and their expertise. What I have to share tonight is coming from the perspective of my area of expertise as a school counselor working with our youth. I am just going to be sharing what we do in our schools, sharing information for parents and guardians and loved ones loved ones who have youth and young people, young adults, and things that they can look for in terms of risk factors for suicide, or if you have students or young people who are experiencing some crisis and trauma in their life. So things to watch for when we're talking about students who might be in crisis are the feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, differences in mood and behavior, changes, like complete changes in behavior, going from very happy one day to extremely sad and very low, anxiousness, anxiety, worry, depression, anger or aggression. And then we talk about like those direct threats or indirect threats, statements like, oh, I wish I was dead, I'm better off dead, things would be better if I'm not here. Things like those are things, warnings, signals, things that you can look out for if a student might be experiencing some suicidal thoughts or ideations or some feelings of crisis. Also engaging in risky or erratic behavior. So doing some things that they normally wouldn't do, getting involved into drugs and alcohol, different sexual activity, breaking the law, just, completely different from their normal character. And then also life triggers. So experiencing a loss, a death, a loss of a pet, a loss of a loved one, a loss in relationship, friendships, breakups, a traumatic experience. I know in the video it talked about a sexual assault. So abuse and things like that. Moving maybe, a move that, or a divorce, so many things. Like there's a long list. Each person is different, so we don't know how different things affect one another, but it's just a list of a multitude of things that could add to the risk factors for these feelings. So the biggest thing that I feel that is needed in what we're doing today is about the education, the awareness, and resources. Those three things are very powerful. We talked about stigma, we talked about barriers. That goes with a lack of education, a lack of awareness because we don't talk about things. So just having this platform, having those spaces where we can talk, we can share, we can bring information is very powerful, and it helps with the work of changing the dynamic and saving lives. So in the school setting, and all schools are different, but most school settings, there's like a crisis intervention team, or there's individuals, professionals in the school that work in some kind of crisis management. So we have school counselors. Our district is lucky that we have, in addition to school counselors, there's school psychologists and school mental health social workers in our buildings, along with nurses and other staff that work with like a crisis management team. And so when students are experiencing these crises, one of those individuals is alerted. In my role, when I get those alerts about students, I meet with them. We do lethality assessments. We have those conversations with students. We ask those hard questions like Dr. Perry was asking. We ask very direct questions to get to the meat of things. How you're having suicidal thoughts, how long? Do you have a plan? How often? Have you ever tried to commit suicide before? What are you thinking? Do you have access? So these are all important pieces to saving a life. You have to know if people, where they are at. And we don't know where they're at if we don't have a conversation. Dr. Cook shared those important numbers. Crisis services, those are 24-hour numbers. I use them all the time. We are in our third week of school, and my building has called crisis services a number of times. We use those numbers. So they have mental health professionals there 24/7. And they are the professional. We are really just calling in and saying, I'm with this individual and this is where they're at. These are the things that they told me. They have a plan, they have access. Maybe at home, some of the things that I look for is if a student, what kind of support do they have at home? Do the parent think that this is just attention-seeking behavior, or they're like, yeah, no, they're okay? Or, is that student often alone? What are the supports in place? So when we make those phone calls, we're not asking people to really be the professional, but it's important to make the call. You make the call and there's a mental health designee make that determination. They will help lead and guide you and that individual to a safe place. And it's all about safety. So we really want to get to, we want individuals to be safe. We want to create a safety plan. We want to know what the risk factors are. Some other risk factors when dealing with individuals who are contemplating suicide: has there been suicide attempts in the past? Has there been past hospitalizations? If students have if an individual has a documented mental health condition, are they connected? Are they linked with services? Are they on medication? All of those things can increase risk factors and increase likeliness. So you have to ask those questions. We have to have the hard conversations. And so another thing that we're doing like I said, in the school building is we are determined to have a trusted adult. We want all of our students to have a trusted adult, to have a connection with somebody in our building, because we know that connections mean things, relationships mean things. So when people feel like they are supported and people care, they have somebody when they're in crisis to reach out to. So it's important building relationships and building those bridges, talking with somebody. Like Dr. Cook said, that active listening. Okay, we know that you don't always have the right words to say, but you're there, you're listening, you're encouraging that person. Like, I don't have the answers, but I'm here with you and I'm gonna help you navigate this. okay, we're going to get these numbers. We're going to call somebody that knows. So it's very important to build relationships and make connections. We have different support groups in our schools. We have mental health counseling. We have contracts with local mental health professionals in the area that comes to our school to support our students. Because we're dealing with, on top of the pandemic, our youth are dealing with complex trauma, okay? Some of the things that students are dealing with are things that we have not seen or dealt with in our lifetime as adults. So it's a new thing, you know, it's very difficult. So they are trying to navigate life and dealing with complex trauma, but don't have the necessary coping skills. So it's very compounded. It's a lot of work. But like I said, it's all about education, awareness, and resources. So it is, like I said, I can't thank the Links enough for this platform and creating this space and opportunity for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Rose. I personally want to thank you. I have 2 kids in high school, a senior and a junior, and it is so prevalent that services be available when the time is needed. Our children spend 7 to 10 hours a day in the public school systems, and then they come home to us. And sometimes we do miss opportunities to address issues, and it goes unnoticed. But knowing that we have resources available in the school at a drop of a dime, prepared to act is something that I know that I'm grateful for. So thank you so much for that valuable information. Our next panelist is Kelly D. Dumas. Kelly D. Dumas is a licensed clinical social worker and has over 19 years of experience working in human services. Kelly is currently employed by Best Self Behavioral Health in Buffalo, New York, as a Chief Strategic Initiative Officer. There, she oversees the specialty substance use services, community-based treatment services, homeless and housing services, and leads the racial equity and inclusion work across the organization. Kelly is an adjunct professor at UB School of Social Work. She enjoys singing, particularly praise and worship, reading and spending time with her husband, Reggie, and her 2 children, Denise and Dennis. Please welcome Ms. Kelly D. Dumas.
Thank you, Stephanie. I didn't realize I put the D. My mama called me Kelly D. So that threw me off a little bit. I'm so honored to be in this space with such prestigious panelists, and wow, the information that has been shared so far. And the points that I had down, they were all pretty much have already been highlighted. I think most importantly, from an event like this, walking away and knowing the big message is that suicide is preventable. Suicide is preventable. And so there have already been so many great resources, and looking for the signs. And I think the first part to getting to that space of preventing suicide is we have to talk about it like we're doing today. And so forums like this is so important. So yes, thank you to the Links members and group for allowing and bringing this discussion together. And I really encourage everyone to not stop the discussion here, because we're here talking about it, and it's important that we leave here and that we talk about it, because we have to normalize mental health is real, and we have to normalize that. And the way you normalize that is you have to talk about it. Dr. Perry, thank you. That disclosure of anxiety and depression, that goes so far in normalizing it. Like several of the panelists have already mentioned, mental health does not discriminate. Any and all of us at any given time can be subject to mental health, to the point of feeling despair, hopelessness, and you get on that slope and it can lead to suicidal thoughts, plans. And so none of us are immune. And it really is when we find ourselves in a space of going down that path or needing help, we have to normalize talking about it. One of the things that I think gets in the way of that sometimes, at least I know for me, is sometimes, we fear not having the right words to say. Or sometimes we fear, I know someone had mentioned, there's this myth of if you talk about it, it's going to plant it in the person's mind. And so, or they may say something and I don't know how to respond. One of the best things that you probably can do is deliver yourself from the feeling that you have to have the answer and that you have to have the right thing to say. A lot of times it's about having that listening ear. And then we've already been given some resources, and it's about being able to help guide and direct that person to where they can get help. One thing to remember and know is that oftentimes if someone is willing and they're discussing their thoughts of suicide, that's a good thing. Many people, once they have decided and they're there, they're not talking about it. They've already surpassed that point. So some of those signs that were discussed, those warning pieces, those things they've already got. So they've gotten to the point where they have decided and they're not going to talk about it. Someone who's willing to discuss and engage, there's hope. There's hope. Otherwise, they would not be talking. So that's a good thing if someone says that. And you know what? I would rather take the risk of asking someone if they're okay and inviting them to talk and be wrong than to say nothing because I'm scared. I don't know if I should say something and be wrong. So it's okay to check. We are our brother and sisters keepers. And so I think it is important that we check on each other. We talk to each other. If you see someone struggling, and we could, I think it's difficult to have a checklist because, as someone also mentioned, there are definitely signs. And also remember that it shows up differently in different people. So a lot of it is really about, knowing your loved ones, knowing your family, knowing your friends, the people that you are connected to. And so when you see changes in behaviors, that's when we should start talking and asking questions. Hey, what's going on? You okay? If someone who I'm a very spiritual person, and I know people who are very spiritual. And if I see that someone gets to a point where they're depressed and they're going into a slump and they stop talking about praying and spirituality, that's a sign, because I know that that's core and key to who you are. And that's one of your, that's a support for you. That's what keeps you going. So it's really about knowing the people that we're connected to, paying attention. And when we see those changes, which in this period in time that we're in now is just so prevalent because we're all stressed and going through different things, and hopelessness can set in. This pandemic has really been taxing. And then Ebony talked about the young people and what they go through, and it can be different with them as well. I have two teens, Lord, I have two teens of 15 and 17. And those ages, they can be moody already and they're going through, so it can be hard. And I had to catch myself because I was brought up in a very strict upbringing where you didn't talk about, it was like nothing, we didn't really talk about, I guess, depression or those kind of feelings. And so when we learn better, we do better. And so I try to be different with my children and invite those topics. But sometimes, I have to be very intentional because sometimes I don't really want to hear what might come out their mouths, but I have to prepare myself because I need to. And so we have to talk. We have to prepare ourselves to listen and hear. And then and judgment free, which can also be a challenge, but to lend that ear, and then also connect people because there's a lot of supports out there. So I just want to thank you again. I know we wanted to have time for questions, so I don't want to prolong it, but thank you. And I encourage you to leave here and continue talking about mental health. Continue and check on your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you. All of our panelists tonight have been so valuable with the information they have provided to us. And we're so appreciative of your time and the words you have expressed to us. Suicide affects all of us. It impacts families, it impacts strangers, it impacts everyone, our friends. It's just very impactful. We want to welcome our president back, Mrs. Lee Whitaker. She's going to share her story and a personal impact of how suicide has affected her life.
Jerry. My brother Jerry committed suicide. My brother Jerry committed suicide. Those words rang hollow in my mind because it was incomprehensible, hard to hear, impossible to believe. Yet my brother put a pistol to his right temple on June 6, 1990, 31 years ago. But the memory and feeling is that it happened just yesterday. The hurt and devastation still lingers. And it took me personally 10 years to speak the words that my brother committed suicide. An outgoing young man, 35 years of age, who is talented beyond measure in the areas of carpentry and auto mechanics. One who could tune his race car to make it sound as smooth and calm as a sewing machine. His race car was one of the fastest cars in the area. He was gainfully employed by Harrison Radiator Division of General Motors, had married, owned a home. He was a kind and gentle-natured man who called or came by my house on a weekly basis to check on my daughters and myself. My husband also loved him as a brother, and they had a very good relationship. Sadly, at the time that we were not aware of any danger signs or signs of distress in his life. Therefore, we were blindsided and shocked beyond measure when he was found dead from that gunshot wound. So shocked that we could not openly talk about it to anyone outside of the family. We denied that he took his own life. After all, we reasoned amongst ourselves that Jerry could not have taken his own life because he was shot in the right temple. Jerry was left-handed. Could he have been on drugs? No. The toxicology report revealed no drugs in his system other than alcohol. So we asked ourselves, what happened to him? Why was he so desperate that he took his own life? What did we miss? If he had problems, did he or couldn't he have come to us? Why couldn't he talk to us? Were there warning signs that we missed? We felt so guilty. We felt that we failed him. One of our younger brothers texted me just a few days ago and stated that we held Jerry to such a high standard that he was the go-to guy for many things that we needed. Maybe the pressure got to him. What were the warning signs? In retrospect, there were some warning signs. Even though he was gainfully employed, he had started borrowing small amounts of money on a regular basis from me and even my pre-teenage daughters. He did not call or check on us as often as he did before. He slowly withdrew from us. I was told that when our father got the news about my brother, his son, he blurted out, "It happened again." The it was that my grandfather's sister, my father's aunt, also took her own life years and years ago. That was a well-kept secret in our family, only whispered within the older generation, because suicide was not a topic to be openly discussed in the Black community or households. My father was so consumed with grief that our mother thought he would not survive. When he arrived in Niagara Falls for the funeral, he was a broken man. Grief counseling probably would have helped him a lot, but of course, we in the Black community don't or did not talk about suicide at the time. We were just a shattered family, broken into so many pieces that we couldn't put it back together again, because there was always that missing piece, Jerry. When one takes their own lives, they do not realize that they affect so many other lives that are left behind. We learn to cope and we learn to live. I have a couple of comments from my sisters and my brother. My daughter added that it changed us as a family, how we stopped getting together for holidays, how there was a heaviness that lingered amongst the siblings and nieces and nephews for years. And even now, some of my brothers started to drink and drink heavily to stop the pain. One of my daughters wrote that it speaks to shock and incomprehensibility of suicide. For a long time, it seemed like the family didn't get together except at funerals. We're doing better of late, but it took a long time to get there. I can say for me that while the shock has gone, the emotions about his passing are still there. My sister wrote, to this day, it has left a lot of questions. The main question is why? And what could have been done? What could have been so bad that it was too much for him to face the next day or to tell somebody what was going on in his mind? Suicide is steadily climbing in the Black community. We must talk about it openly, and more than talk about it, let's do something about it, because it does affect families in so many ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being so open with us and sharing. It puts, it's close to the heart. It puts a picture, to the idea of suicide. So thank you so much for sharing with us those details. It impacts us all. Well, we have come to the end of our program. I hope that you all have been impacted by what we discussed this evening, but I also hope that you have placed some questions in our comment and chat box. We're going to open that up, and if you like to type in your comments or chat in the chat box, we would appreciate it. I'm going to ask a couple questions while we wait for some things. Some of the questions here are, it's a small question for a broad subject, but if our panelists could tell us, what do you think the biggest stigma is regarding suicide?
I would say it doesn't happen. It doesn't occur in the Black community, especially.
A lot of people have shame. It brings shame.
And does talking help?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I think everyone highlighted tonight, that talking is essential. Oftentimes I know clients have told me they feel so alone when they're having suicidal ideations. So talking is definitely essential. I think like all the panelists reported earlier, is that having a platform like this allows you to talk about it, to have awareness about it, and to educate yourself about the dynamics of it. So you can be aware of the risk factors. Even our Mrs. Rose highlighted as a school counselor that some of the risk factors may be a little bit different for adolescents, but it's important for people to understand what it is. So when you start to see changes in behavior, it allows you to pay more attention.
Given this past year with the pandemic and people finding themselves at home and alone, have you found that in your workplaces and in your community of professionals that there has been a great deal of outreach for help?
Tremendous.
Stephanie, I wanted to share before I forgot what your first question was, and I could not unmute to add to it.
Oh, my first question was about stigma. If you
yes. A big piece that I just wanted to add is also, I think that as Black women, oftentimes it's like strong Black women. you hear that. And so depression, suicide often is linked with weakness. And so as long as we are tying to, we have to be strong, we're resilient, and then almost that doesn't allow you to have that vulnerability because we can't be weak. And so I think that also plays into us needing to keep that persona of being strong.
I'd like
yes.
to piggyback off if I can. As professionals, and I'm pretty sure that we all could attest to this, it makes it even more difficult as a person of color and a woman to kind of go into the professional world and deal with our livelihood, our children, our families, and still be strong as a professional. We're not allowed to have those emotions. We're not allowed to do certain things. And I definitely think that's part of the stigma, and one of the reasons why I struggled, because I wasn't allowed to be that person. I wasn't allowed to be that depressed person or that anxious person, because I had to, I guess, compete with my colleagues, and it's not just, about color, but it's also about being a female and of color that makes it more difficult.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I will give you our chapter website and our chapter email. So please, 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 if you have any questions or if there's something that you're thinking about and we could forward the question, we definitely will. Our website is linksniagarafallschapter.com. On the front page of the website, you will find those crisis services numbers listed there. They're also listed in our chat box. Mrs. Ebony Rose has placed the numbers there as well. I would encourage you, as Dr. Thomasina Cook has said, let that be a contact number in your phone so that you can just scroll to it and hit talk if need be. But again, on the website, you will see that we have listed the telephone numbers, the resource numbers. If you have any questions in regards to this program or any questions for our chapter, you can email us at linksniagarafalls@gmail.com.
And Stephanie, can I just highlight, as a criminal justice practitioner as well, is that it's very important to have these numbers on hand, because one of the things that is also sometimes a barrier for someone to get services again is because a lot of times we call 911. And unfortunately, sometimes the criminal justice system do not handle mental health crisis the way we as mental health professionals will handle them. So a lot of times family members would just go to 911 and then the police will come there, and depending on the circumstances, they would do a thing called 941, which is a New York State mental health law, where they would take sometimes our loved ones into the police car to bring them to the psych emergency room, which is not an issue because, definitely if someone needs help, but there's crisis services does a much better job of handling mental health issues than our police department. So just keep that in mind as well too. So it's just like I highlighted, it's just so important just to have these numbers, or even have the non-emergency number in your phone for your local police department as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that. One last question. If someone is seeking help, would they need a referral? Can they just pick up a phone and seek treatment? Should they go through a physician? What in a non-emergency situation?
It depends on the level of care. They do make it difficult to access mental health. Sometimes people do require that insurances require that you have a referral. However, there is some ways around it. Crisis services will give you other contacts to give you someone more immediate that you can speak to in that meantime. I don't recommend, honestly, coming to the hospital for that care. So that takes away some resources. But if you can call someone to get other resources, that would be, better.
Okay.
Yeah, and definitely, and if you just call just even your local mental health counseling programs, they will point you in the right direction. They will assist you in making appropriate referrals, and you can always talk to your family physician as well too.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to thank you all again. Thank our chapter president, Mrs. Lee Whitaker, Dr. Thomasina Cook, Dr. Charlize Perry, Mrs. Kelly Dumas, and Mrs. Ebony Rose. You all have been a blessing to all of us and provided us with valuable information. And we can't thank you enough. So again, thank everyone for joining us this evening for this program. It has been very impactful. I hope you all leave a little bit more knowledgeable than when you joined us. Thank you for registering. We will be sending out post surveys in regards to our program. We hope that you would complete it and email it back to us. The Niagara Falls, New York chapter of the Lynx would like to thank you and wish you a good evening.